Welcome to the Explainer. Let's just jump right in, shall we? Despite being completely surrounded by harmful organisms, toxins, and honestly, even the constant threat of our very own cells going rogue and turning into tumors, we humans actually manage to survive. How? Well, it's because our body operates like this highly coordinated, incredibly lethal military force designed to protect us from microscopic threats. It's not just a few random cells, it's a vast, interconnected network of organs, tissues, cells, and molecules all working in absolute lockstep. Today, we're going to break down exactly how this incredible defense network identifies a threat, mounts a massive counterattack, and ultimately secures your long-term survival.
So, here's our mission briefing for today. We'll start by looking at the overarching macro strategy, then meet the frontline innate infantry, explore how intelligence is gathered, call in the adaptive special forces, and finally put it all together in a full-scale battle simulation.
All right, starting with part 1, the macro strategy, defining our two main branches of defense.
Right at the top level, your body's military faces a pretty massive trade-off. On one hand, you have the innate immune response. Now this side is feverishly fast, literally, it kicks in within minutes to hours and is actually what's causing your fevers. But the catch? It is completely nonspecific and has absolutely zero memory of past invaders. On the flip side, we have the adaptive immune response. This one takes weeks to fully peak, but it is highly specific to unique pathogen parts, which we call antigens, and crucially, it retains a long-lasting memory for any future attacks. It's a classic speed versus precision trade-off.
Moving on to section 2. Let's meet your body's first responders, the frontline innate infantry.
Now, before any actual cellular combat even kicks off, you've got this amazing system of physical and chemical barriers keeping invaders out of the fortress. You might not immediately think of these as part of your immune system, but we're talking about the protective lysozymes in your tears, the brutally low pH of your stomach acid, the vast epithelium covering your skin and your gut, and those tiny hair-like cilia lining your airways that literally sweep invaders away. Together, these are your castle walls.
But what happens when a threat actually manages to breach those walls? That's when the cellular infantry steps up, with neutrophils leading the absolute charge. When a neutrophil encounters a pathogen, it executes this wild biological maneuver called phagocytosis. Step 1, it wraps its cytoplasm around the pathogen and essentially swallows it whole into a compartment called a phagosome. Step 2, it fuses that compartment with granules, dropping the pH and making the environment highly acidic. And step 3, if that invader is stubborn and the neutrophil is maxed out, it unleashes the heavy artillery, an oxidative burst. We're talking highly reactive oxygen species, like hydrogen peroxide, deployed to completely melt the invader's proteins and nucleic acids right from the inside out.
It's not just neutrophils out there on the ground, though. We've got specialty support troops, too. Take eosinophils, for example. They actually stain pink under a microscope. They're your primary defense against large, unwieldy worms and parasites, but they're also major culprits behind hay fever. Then we have basophils, which stain blue, and mast cells. Mast cells are really interesting because they live directly in your tissues rather than just circulating in your blood. These lesser common cells are essentially packed with granules full of histamine. When they deploy, they flood the area with these pro-inflammatory molecules, which initiates and amplifies allergic responses by rushing blood straight to the battlefield.
Okay, Section 3, Intelligence and Antigen Presentation. Time to call in the Special Forces.
So, say the frontline infantry gets overwhelmed. They need backup from higher command, right? But to get that backup, they need to communicate. This requires a critical intelligence bridge between the innate infantry and the adaptive special forces. Enter antigen presentation. Dendritic cells are our ultimate spies here. They hang out in places like the skin or the gut, just constantly sampling the environment. When they ingest a pathogen, they mature, chop the invader's proteins down into short amino acid chains, those are our antigens, and then travel straight through the lymphatic fluid directly to the nearest lymph node to share this critical intel.
But here's the thing. They don't just hand this intelligence over casually. It requires a highly secure molecular handshake. T cells literally cannot see their target unless the dendritic cell presents the antigen directly on what is essentially a molecular silver platter. We call this platter the major histocompatibility complex, or MHC for short. It acts exactly like a specific lock waiting for a specific T cell key. Only a T cell with a receptor that perfectly matches the unique shape of that presented antigen is going to snap open and be primed for war.
Which brings us to Section 4, the Adaptive Special Forces, your highly targeted snipers and generals.
Armed with that fresh intelligence, our specialized lymphoid cells finally enter the fray, and they follow very strict rules of engagement.
First up, natural killer cells. Technically, they're part of the innate system, but they are lymphocytes that pack a serious punch, inducing programmed cell death in infected and cancerous cells by punching physical pores right into their membranes. Next, B cells, the absolute masters of humoral immunity. They bind directly to antigens and mature into plasma cells, pumping out massive amounts of targeting antibodies. Then we have our T cells running cell-mediated immunity. CD4 helper T cells act like the generals of the battlefield, coordinating everything with chemical cytokines, but they strictly require their antigens presented on an MHC2 platter. And finally, the CD8 cytotoxic T cells. These are your targeted snipers that take out infected cells, but their strict rule of engagement: the antigen must be presented on an MHC1 platter.
All right, Section 5. Let's put all this theory to the test with a complete battle simulation.
So let's run a chronological simulation of a bacterial pathogen successfully invading your lungs. In the very first few minutes, bacteria slip past those cilia in your airways. Resident macrophages ingest them and fire off chemical flares. Basophils and mast cells create immediate inflammation, making your blood vessels leaky, so fresh neutrophils can dive right into the lung tissue. Over the next few hours, immature dendritic cells beneath the lung surface digest the bacteria and start their long trek to the lymph nodes. Over several days, those dendritic cells arrive and present the bacterial antigens on their MHC2 platters. The specific naive T cells that recognize that exact antigen get primed and undergo massive clonal expansion, multiplying their ranks exponentially. Finally, over the coming weeks, B cells get the signal to become plasma cells. Antibody levels finally hit their peak, floating freely in your blood plasma, to tag every single remaining bacteria for immediate destruction by the phagocytes.
But, every war eventually has to end. Once the bacteria are entirely wiped out, keeping this massive, metabolically expensive army around just doesn't make sense. So most of those highly specialized, clonally expanded B and T cells quietly die off in a process called clonal deletion. But here is the absolutely crucial part. A select few live on. They become memory B and memory T cells. These seasoned veterans linger in your tissues and your bloodstream for years. If that exact same bacterial strain ever dares to cross your barriers again, these memory cells will instantly and massively proliferate, mounting a dramatically stronger, faster response to give you that long-term immunity.
So, your immune system remembers its battles for years, silently maintaining this microscopic garrison just to protect you. The real question is, how well are you equipping it for the next one? Think about that. Until next time, keep learning and stay curious.